Our next special friend and guest is Joe Putignano. Joe is the best-selling author of Acrobaddict. We talked about this earlier this morning, Kasey, and he was recently seen discussing his book on Dr. Sanjay Gupta and Anderson Cooper 360 on CNN. He's been on all the networks, ABC, CBS, Headlines, and, Huffington, you name it, folks. Joe is also an acrobat and contortionist who has performed in over 1,000 shows as the original Crystal Man in Cirque du Soleil in Totem. Now, his story is so inspiring, and this is why we wanted to have Joe on to talk about this balancing act between his dream for Olympic glory and getting close to sleeping on park benches. It's just an amazing story. You'll want to pick up his best-selling book. And, Joe, what a terrific pleasure it is to have you join us this morning.
Thank you.
A life that, what can we say, it was shattered by addiction initially. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. Yes. Back when I was competing as a gymnast, I started using drugs, and it definitely destroyed any hopes I had of going to the Olympics.
Yeah. By the way, I say this to folks like you for good reason. I, too, am in recovery. I understand this balancing act. And with that said, Joe, we understand the love that we have for drugs and for heroin and for booze and whatnot, whereas everyday folks who don't have a substance abuse problem may find it a little difficult to understand. So you had two loves, heroin or whatever your choice was to get high, and acrobatics.
Yes. It's interesting because a lot of people don't understand addiction who aren't addicted, and it's very difficult for us to explain why we would choose something like this. It's a whole other topic, but for me, it was my first love was definitely sports and gymnastics, which a lot of people can relate to. And then after that, I discovered drugs and alcohol. It was heroin or opiates. First, it was prescription drugs, and then it turned into heroin, which definitely won. And I had to choose one because it was too difficult to do both. And sadly, I chose drugs over my passion.
So this obsession, actually, we end up dedicating our lives towards these drugs. When you do something like that, again, very hard to understand how they can see such a handsome young man with such a promising future, throw it all. They say, how could you throw that all away?
Right.
Talk to us.
I know.
Talk to us about the same amount of energy and obsession and dedication that it takes to create an Olympic athlete. Also, it takes to create a homeless drug addict, doesn't it?
Yes. And I'm glad you talked about that, because something I love to try and get my message out now is that recovery is possible. And if you are out there and you're addicted to something, I understand the shame and fear you have behind just admitting it or even coming to terms with that. But what I discovered in my story is that the same amount of energy or the same dedication and drive I had as a gymnast was the same energy behind being an addict. And if you continue on with that, was also the same thing that got me into recovery. And what I mean by that is every day I did gymnastics, hours and hours, and it's all I could think about. I was dedicated, I was disciplined, which sounds more like obsession. Mm-hmm. And when I became a drug addict, it was the same thing. I did it every day, even when I didn't want to do it. which felt very much like sport, and sports are very punishing, which we actually don't talk about. We talk about mostly the love and the passion. But for a gymnast, and actually most people I know in sports, our bodies are bashed, but we continue to do it. And that, for me, if you're a heroin addict, you know what that means. You often go into withdrawal, and it's physically demanding.
Yes.
And to continue on with that in recovery, that's how I got out of it, was that same mentality of, like, not picking up literally, and I don't want to sound too 12-step preachy, but just not doing it one step at a time. Of course it wasn't, or one day at a time. It wasn't that easy, but that was the idea and the energy and the drive behind getting sober.
Sure. Ladies and gentlemen, there may be a major motion picture that will center around Joe Putignano's life, and rightfully so. But be sure to pick up his book. This is a true young man's dream for Olympic glory, and his battle to save not only his ability as a gymnast, but his soul. And you will be so inspired by his best-selling book, Acrobaddict. Where can we get this book? And your website, Joe, is?
My website is www.joeputignano.com, but the book is available at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Yes. I know I'm not going to sound AA preachy. I'm just going to ask you early on in your addiction, Joe, did drugs help you?
Oh, boy. I love that question, and I have to be honest.
Yeah?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
They did.
I'm glad. I love your answer.
Yes. It's funny, I said that to someone yesterday. It's very interesting. I was having such a difficult time in my life. Teenagers are, which, parents need to understand. Like, there's a lot of things going on they don't know about. And for me, drugs, they saved my life during that time. Mm-hmm. They saved my life until it turned on me.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And you can describe that feeling that drugs gave you on that side, and then, whoops, you can tell us about dope sickness.
Oh, wow. It's the worst. It's the worst thing I've experienced. It's very difficult to be addicted to a substance that makes you feel whole,
yeah,
loved, complete, and I used to describe it as if I was held by God.
Wow.
Now, without that substance, you get physically sick, and the best way I can describe it to someone who doesn't understand it is like having the worst flu of their life. Mm-hmm. Now, when people have the flu, there's no cure for it. They have to wait it out. But knowing there is one thing out there that would make it go away, it's torturous.
Yes.
So not only when you are at that level of addiction, you're physically dependent on it, but you're also emotionally and spiritually. So if you combine all of those things together, we choose heroin over love, over food, over anything else, because it's how we breathe and cope in the world.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely it is. Joe Putignano is the best-selling author of Acrobaddict. Folks, you need to pick up this book. You take us through your strength, through your redemption, through your recovery, and a return to a new you, a reborn you, and, of course, the sport that you once gave up for drugs. What can be more inspiring in life than that, Joe? Nothing.
Yeah, that was difficult. I went back into acrobatics very late in life, I would say, because the best years of being a gymnast, I was using drugs. And I was in homeless shelters, and it was terrible. But when I finally did get sober around 29, I knew, and this is part of my message as well, if I was going to make it in sobriety, I had to go back to something I loved more than anything in the world.
Right.
And everybody has something they love. And that's not bad for them. And for me, it was the artistry of gymnastics. And having done that, even though I was old, 29, for that sport, I did it because my heart wouldn't not let me do it.
Yes.
And then that cultivated into me working. And then I got into Cirque du Soleil, and, one door opened and then a million doors opened.
I heard you in an interview, and you just said this was a love anything else in this world didn't compare with. Well, perhaps this addiction, this love, was otherworldly, an obsession that we sometimes don't understand. Obviously, an everyday person listening to that is going to say, what do you mean otherworldly? But it does have that sense of grasp, that depth to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, I would definitely say for me, doing gymnastics, or when you find that thing that is you're passionate about, it's as if you were doing it in another lifetime, and you're just uncovering the layers of it.
Yep.
It's an ancient feeling, It's just like when a musician first hears a note and they that's it, I know it. And
Yep.
It's bizarre, but it's incredible.
It is. And as hard it is to describe or to allow others to understand, you've gone through it. By the way, what caused you to put the brakes on?
Well, I tried to stop using that whole time. From age 19, I went to my first 12-step meeting, and I was in a homeless shelter, and they made us go. And I was a benzodiazepine cocaine addict then.
Yeah.
But from 19 to 29, I went to 4 rehabs, mental institutions, everything, you name it.
Yeah.
I was always trying to get clean, but I couldn't. And that I think is why my message is so powerful, because it's about not giving up.
Yes.
And what happened was I was seeing my friends dying, and I realized, I was still alive and I was miserable. So I imagined myself at age 40 still shooting heroin. And that to me felt worse than death.
Yes.
And I said, I cannot live with this anymore. And so I gave it my all, and I failed. I failed a million times, but I kept trying. I think that's important for anyone listening, is you cannot give up because your life is at stake.
Oh, my gosh. If there's any one thing that you listeners get out of this, it is what Joe just said. It's about not giving up. My God, 2 things. A, you are so loved. I hope you can feel the love over the airwaves.
Well, it's still early, so.
Well, you have a huge radio hug embracing you, and our gratitude, my friend. And also, you made a quote that I wrote down and will use in a tribute to you, Joe. And that was about a shower, when we're talking about one day at a time.
Yes, yesterday's shower won't keep us clean. I definitely, I'll have 8 years clean. I just had 8 years clean. I had it on March 25th.
Beautiful. Congratulations. Woo.
Thank you. And people often ask, why do you still go to meetings? And that's definitely the reason, is yesterday's shower won't keep me clean. And it's a daily reprieve, and it's bizarre, but everything on the spiritual side that I've cultivated in one day seems to go away after I've slept for 8 hours. And I start anew, but that's life, and that's everybody, and because this is a disease that originates in the soul and in the mind, we have to, the way we attack it, or our only solution, is definitely in the moment. And I know if anyone's confused by that, it's a spiritual principle, but it does seem to work best for us.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in the moment, for today, for right now, You are winning this battle in this moment to not only save your own soul, but hopefully to touch others. And who knows where that message can lead. Joe Putignano, huge thanks for who you are. I don't know if the good Lord put you here to go through all this to inspire us, but if he did, it has worked.